Midway through Season 15, and Alvacate enters the top 5 on the ranked leaderboards, being the only person to have their most played character be Genji. But how did Alvacate do it? How did he diff Kevster, one of the most respected Genji veterans in the game? Well, let's find out. Seeing that we're in a full-on Malgam era, despite him being the most disliked and banned character in the game, you need to understand Alvacate's job. Something that the fan doesn't have. If you saw my last video on Sugar-Free, you'll know a large part of your job is to win the Genji-Lucio side duel, which a lot of you grammar nerds were pointing out my spelling for. But that's only half the story. The other half is zoning and drawing aggression. Because Genji's got deflect, he can hold super aggressive positions for a decently long time, and because of the dash, he's able to leave very quickly if he needs to. First fight, this is something that we see Alvacate do straight off the bat. He plays the opposite side to his Malga right next to the enemy backline, allowing him to safely aggress onto the Kiriko. Now, he does get deflect forced out, but look at how much attention he's drawing from 4 different people. You'd think he'd get cooked harder than Alvacate's diss track on the Fran, but he's actually fine. More importantly though, he doesn't dash out, he keeps his angle. All this attention drawing means that even when Vistola stomps TVNT and is winning the HP trade, it doesn't actually matter. This is because the enemy Sojin Kiri are looking at Alvacate, meanwhile his Sojin Kiri are looking at Vistola. This means Vistola gets shredded despite having the early advantage, and because Alvacate didn't dash out, he pushes the angle onto the Kiriko while Vistola dies stomping out. This is something that I've called the turn and burn in previous videos, where one player will zone 3 or 4 enemies, so in this case Alvacate, which allows the rest of your team to turn and burn the enemy tank. If you are wondering what Vistola should have done, just force Alvacate's dash. Vistola can stomp around the car, forcing Alvacate to leave, and if TVNT stomps in, he will feed. Trust me, he's got no hands. We see another variation of this on second point. Alvacate starts off trying to punish Kevster, who doesn't have his dash, and he himself almost gets punished. Thankfully, Astro hits a clutch Suzu, and FD God swoops in to try and boop Kevster away. Funnily enough, the second TVNT sees Kevster dashing in, he himself stomps in. Probably because he knows that his backline's gonna be safe since Kevster's got no dash, and that is the time where Ken is gonna be doing stuff on Sojin. Good news is that the stomp is huge, stunning both the Lucio and Sojin, but unfortunately, Vistola can't say the same. This is where that turn and burn comes in. This time, TVNT is the one to zone off 3 people, meanwhile Alvacate and his backline turn and burn Vistola, who's now in open space. With another fight under Alvacate's belt, him and his team decide to hold close. There's 2 reasons for this. Firstly, even if you lose the fight, you take time off the clock, because the enemy team aren't pushing carts. And secondly, you don't actually need to fight close. You can force ultimates up close, then retreat back to where you'd normally fight. Judging by the ult economy from Alvacate's team, he doesn't need to do that second option. However, you are about to witness one of the most baffling fights I've ever seen. Embarrassingly, TVNT catches absolutely nobody in his cage, which seems to be a trend for Saudi Malga players apparently. As a result, Alvacate immediately pops the blade, not knowing that TVNT caught nothing. Even worse though, Vistola decides to run into the cage and feeds. It's like he's the GOAT in Severance, being sacrificed for no actual reason. Now, despite Alvacate not finding immediate value with the blade, he zones off the Genji, Lucio and Kiriko with it, which allows his team to just easily burn Vistola. Now, the bad news is that Alvacate's team used 2 ults, whereas the enemy team used nothing, meaning for next fight, he's obviously gonna get rolled. However, that's the entire point of the close holds. In fact, Alvacate's team start close holding at around 3 minutes 50, and the cart only starts pushing just over a minute later. The ult economy for Kevster's team isn't looking too good either, needing to use 3 ults just to get out of spawn. At this kind of level, and in this kind of comp, how you play Genji changes pretty dramatically based on the ults. In this example, Alvacate is just under 40% off to his blade, and so is FD God with his beats. This means him and his team want a long, slow, drawn out fight to build up something like Blade to help finish the fights. That doesn't mean you just AFK and spam shurikens down main though. Alvacate flanks under the bridge, directly under his Sojin, who pops the overclock in order to force Gogo's beats. Advocate going under means Kevster is forced between a rock and a hard place. You either go for Zodial or for Advocate. The obvious choice is Zodial, but this leaves Advocate on the angle, similar to how we saw in the very first fights. If Zodial actually managed to live the dive from Kevster, this fight would have definitely been winnable, considering Advocate and FD God basically have their ults at the end of the fights. Now, how could I not go over the number 1 Genji without talking about mechanics? The most interesting part to me are his blades. In this blade, Advocate hits a fan of shurikens onto Slay before he even pulls out the blades, making the slash dash combo very easy to hit and land. Now, this tech has existed since 2016 and is still commonly used, but if you don't know, if you hold shurikens while you dash, you immediately fire a set of shurikens the moment you exit dash, basically meaning you get a one-shot. Again, I mainly see this with attempted one-shots, but doing this tech before the blade means Advocate can immediately kill the Kiriko, wasting no time to kill the Lucio afterwards. The Lucio would have gotten away if Advocate didn't hit those shurikens beforehand on the Kiriko. What about the perks that Advocate uses? Well, recently, most of Genji's perks have been buffed. Acrobatics give Genji an extra jump after wall climb, meditation gets more healing, and blade twisting is more lenient and lethal. Interestingly, in all the codes that Advocate gave me, he chose the Acrobatics perk instead of the Blade perk, which, if you don't know, gives you 30% healing back on blade slashes. I don't know if he just wanted to test the perk out because it got recently buffed, but I do actually think in some cases it's better than the blade perk. Hear me out. The main way I see the extra jump being used is for zoning and controlling doorways. In this case, Tama is chasing Advocate, and Advocate double jumps, wall climbs next to the doorway, and uses that extra jump to avoid that roll damage. In this example, when Advocate blades, he double jumps to avoid any damage coming in from the Genji, Lucio or Juno. He then wall climbs, which gives him another jump, and while he doesn't use it, you can see how that would have been useful to avoid damage from the Cassidy. Now, some players like Kevster still choose that lifesteal perk on Genji. But if we look at the fight that we just saw, where is Advocate gonna get that lifesteal from? No sensible Genji is gonna want to slash into a sound barrier. To put it short, I think in ranked, and for most players, the lifesteal blade perk can be better. Alternatively, if you're using blade to just force out ultimates or zone enemies, then the acrobatics perk can help that zone playstyle a lot more. I will also say that, universally, Genjis are still using that blade twisting perk. It's just great for chaining kills and extending Genji's breakpoints. So, we've seen Genji being played in a full-on Malga mirror, but what about when there's different comps? Well, the fundamentals stay the same, but when you're playing against characters with high burst damage like Torb, Cassidy, or even Sojourn with a fully charged railgun, you need to be paying attention to whether those characters are looking at you. Take this example on Lijiang, where Advocate dashes into the Juno, which does seem like a risky play, but note how there's barely any visual aggro onto him. The Sojourn isn't looking at him, and the Torb is actually off screen below Advocate's. Now, when the Doomfist punches in, Advocate isn't taking any visual aggro because the entire enemy team are looking at the Doomfist. When the Doom dies, Advocate immediately de-peaks because even though he's full HP, he's going to be taking a lot of visual aggro from the Torb and Sojourn. In fact, the only time he peaks is to deflect across the open space to get back to his team, and once he's there, he's not being greedy peeking the Torb or the Sojourn. Again, when Kenil pops Rally, all the visual aggro is transferred onto him, which allows Advocate to walk up and force out KSA. From there, the fight is basically over. Something else you need to rely on though are escapes. Your escapes are often premeditated, and all of your abilities can be escapes. In this case, Advocate walks into the Venture to try and finish them off, and the moment he's critical HP, he dashes to the catwalk above him without hesitation. This implies that Advocate already knew where his escape was. He didn't have to think about it while fighting, which is the important thing for escapes. Anyways, that's it for the video. Check out the playlist on screen if you enjoyed this video, so you can binge watch the rest of the series. Until next time.